Hey everyone, this is Harley. Just wanted to make a quick video to kind of explain my character, what race and class she is, and some of the skills I have, and maybe the reasons why I picked the race and class I did. In the meantime, I'm running across the ocean here. Well, I guess gliding. Um, I'm riding on a Pegasus across the ocean. Every 2 days in real life, you can do something called the dailies. I know it's not daily because it's every 2 days, but anyway, every 2 days you can visit 4 different cities and talk to a woman who gives you a random prize. Um, Usually it's junk, but occasionally it's something useful. Most notably would be never win vouchers, which are little vouchers you can turn that have a specific value between like 50 or 100,000 gold up to probably, I don't know if you can get million, maybe 500,000 or a million gold worth of vouchers, and you go and trade those in to a certain mob, and they'll give you random gear for level 240 and 241, um, which is good. Anyway, so my character is Harly, Harly, and she is an elf. And so in Materia Magica, you pick your race, and then based on what race you pick, you can pick 4 different classes, 60 levels per class. So by the time you finish your 4 classes, you are level 240. And those 4 classes, each one has to be picked from a specific, let me just check this out. Each class has to be picked from a different category. So you can pick 1 fighter class, 1 healer class, 1 mage class, and 1 thief type class. So my character, for the race, I picked elf. Don't ask me why. I sometimes pick things more on, I guess, aesthetics and role-playing, compare versus, just raw stats or whatever. So, I don't know why, I kind of like elves in general. So, and the other thing, too, is that your race, not only does it determine which classes you can pick from, it also determines, so this is the woman I can come to every 2 days. She says, hello, do you want a prize? You say to woman, yes. A summoning stone. Worthless, basically. Anyway, so in-game, if you type score, it brings up your stats and information, basically. So you can see here right now, I can also do this with Harley. So right now, I'm a level 60 is my class level, so I'm 4th class. Total level 240. Female hero. Once you hit 240, become a hero. Let's do score again. So from this you can tell class level 60 to level 240, race elf, class, my current class is priest, alignment, which affects mostly what kind of equipment you can wear. Some equipment requires a certain alignment, some spells and abilities require a certain alignment, some quests and various activities throughout the game require a certain alignment. Usually it's kind of hard to stay a certain alignment because while you're questing and just doing various activities, you'll be killing all kinds of stuff and you don't care if it's good or evil. Your alignment is adjusted when you kill good or evil things in mass. So if you kill a bunch of good things, you become more evil. Kill a bunch of evil things, you become good. Anyway, so your race determines which classes you can be. It also gives you various racial either effects or vulnerabilities or powers based on that. And it also affects your stats. So in Materia Magica, there's sort of hard stats, hard caps, I guess you'd say, based on your race. for hit points, spell points, stamina, and then all these stats as well, your vital statistics. So as you can see here, let's see. So for stats, for your vitals, there's a max of 25 that you could ever have. That's the most. And gear and equipment and stuff can raise your stats, but not past your racial maximum. So this column here, the second column, is my racial maximum. You can see as an elf I have terrible strength, and I have terrible vitality. Luckily, I don't think vitality is that important. Strength is fairly important. For every point of strength you have, you do extra damage, and it also determines how much you can carry. Recently they changed a spell called Enhanced Strength, and made that better, because not only does it increase your strength up to your, well, not up to your cap, but increase your strength statistic, it also increases how much you can carry separately from your strength stat, which is really good, because previously if I had a cap strength of 17, I couldn't carry that many things. It became, I guess it was manageable, but it was still a hassle. Anyway, one reason that I picked Elf was because you'll see here that I have 23 Wisdom, 23 Agility, 23 Sanity, and 23 Luck. And you'll remember I just mentioned 25 is the maximum in-game you can have for any stat. And when you become an Archon, which is, I'm a hero right now, level 240, I can do a quest, which will make me an Archon, which will make me a level 61 out of 241, which means I can level up 180 more levels as an Archon, and it gives you a bunch of bonuses. So when I become an Archon, I'll add 1,000 to each of these maximum hit points, spell points, and stamina, and I'll also add 2 to my maximum for every vital statistic, which will give me the game maximum of Agility, Wisdom, Luck, and Sanity. Now out of those, Agility is really good to have. I think it affects like most of your defenses. I'm a Valkyrie, which I'll get to, which has second defense, which is really good. So having an Agility of 25 is going to be awesome, I believe. And Sanity affects your spell casting, and I'll have 25 in that as well, which will make my spells more powerful and land more often, that type of thing. And so that was one reason I went Elf, was to be able to achieve that. Your stats are also based on which classes you go as well, so each class has the potential to add 2 to a certain statistic. For example, I went Bard first, which their primary stat is Luck, so I got a +2 Luck, so I would have had 21 Luck as an Elf. But by going Bard, actually I take that back. The first class you go when you start the game gives you 3 to that stat, so I went Bard first. I would have had 20 Luck as an Elf, now I have 23. Okay, what else? So I guess my path. So you can see right here, class path. So these are the 4 classes that I went. Bard, Valkyrie. So Bard is my thief type class. Valkyrie is my fighter type class. Ranger is my mage type class. And Priest is my healer type class. When picking these classes, you want to kind of you want to pick your classes based on what stats they give you, and also basically which skills they get. You don't want to have a lot of overlap, because you're kind of wasting. You want to maximize the amount of skills and abilities you have available to yourself. And some classes get the same abilities as other classes, so they can overlap. So when you're planning out your class path, you want to try to plan carefully. I mean, any combination can work if you want to put the time into it. But some are just going to have a lot more skills and abilities available to them. So when you're planning your class path, you want to, there's various complementary classes that go together fairly well because they don't overlap very much. So as an elf, I have to go Bard. So there's 3 thief classes: Bard, Rogue, and Knave. Rogue is more of a true thief, assassin, fighter. Well, I take that back. It's more of a true thief and an agility-based class. Bard gets some of those same skills. They get backstab and those type of things, various weapons. But the big thing about Bard is they get music, obviously. And music is great because you only have to train the music skill, and as long as you have an instrument, it gives you access to many, many various abilities through music, which is really helpful and good. The third one is Knave. They recently added that. I haven't played Knave yet, but as I understand it, it's a little more advanced, and it's hard to play because it lacks a lot of the things that Bard and Rogue have. It's kind of specific that way, but it's really good, I guess, if you're an advanced player. It has it's kind of a tricky assassin type class where you can do all kinds of things to conceal your character, to trick other characters into thinking certain things, and perform all kinds of special kind of trick attacks and those type of things. Valkyrie, in my opinion, Valkyrie is probably the best fighter class, hands down. All the fighter classes are fairly similar. The other ones, so there's Valkyrie, Paladin, Barbarian, and Cavalier. So they're all really similar. Valkyrie, well, I guess I should say that Cavalier and Barbarian, in my opinion, Barbarian gets Axe and a couple attack type skills, and Cavalier gets Lance and Riding. Lance which is, I believe, the highest damage weapon in the game, but you can only use it when you're riding, and there's certain areas that you can't ride at all, so I don't know what the point of going Cavalier is, really, since your best thing is only applicable part of the time. And Barbarian is okay, but axes aren't all that great once you get to the end of the game. Axe kind of evens out with a lot of other things. So that leaves Valkyrie and Paladin. So Paladin, I would say, is probably the weakest fighter class, but it gets magic, and it gets Cure Blind, which is very helpful to have. And there are normally you'd get Cure Blind from your cleric, from your healer class, like Priest. However, there's some healer classes that don't get Cure Blind, in which case going Paladin or Monk is helpful in combination with that, so you can kind of still have Cure Blind. So Paladin, I would probably say, is only valid if you want to take some alternate class path that doesn't get Cure Blind, in which case it can be worth it to go Paladin, even though it's not the strongest fighter. Those other classes can be strong, so in combination it's good. But anyway, so if you're not going a path that requires Paladin, I would say Valkyrie is probably the best fighter class because it gets a lot of the same things other fighter classes get, but it gets second defense, which means you can use 2 defenses in a combat round where other people can only use 1, and that's huge. If someone is dealing 250 damage per hit, and you can dodge 2 of those as opposed to everyone else can only dodge 1, that's huge. And for tanking mobs as well, it's just awesome. It's just amazing. You have double the defenses than most people do. So the only thing, though, is if you're Valkyrie, you have to be female, which is kind of lame, because seeing how it's probably the best fighter class, it just forced you to be female. I mean, I probably wouldn't be female if not for that. So anyway, why? I guess at this point I'll say why I went Bard and Valkyrie first. So let me pull this up. So in the game, you get skills, well, proficiencies and spells. Why can't I? Oh. You get proficiencies and spells. So proficiencies are things that aren't cast, obviously, and spells are. And so here's my list of proficiencies over here. Here's what type they are. Here's the complexity. Complexity means basically when you can begin using it. So when you start off the game, you only know, you can only comprehend low complexity things. and as you level up, your complexity goes up, which unlocks these skills and spells that your class has. Now over here I have learned percent. So as you progress through the game, you'll gain something called practice points, and the main way that you learn things is by spending practice points at a trainer to increase your learned percent, and that way as soon as you unlock a skill, you can pretty much use it as long as you have enough complexity points. However, if your learned percent is very low, you will have a hard time using it. You'll fumble it. You won't. With spells, they'll fizzle and you'll waste your spell points, but nothing will happen. So you pretty much want to practice everything that you're going to be using in everyday use. There's some things you might only practice to like 30, 50%. To better allocate your point, because you have a limited amount of practice points. They're fairly hard to come by. It's the main thing you need to acquire throughout the entire game is practice points to max out everything you can. So you need to efficiently allocate those. So you want to practice things you're going to be using often at first. So anyway, the other thing is that when you practice something through a trainer, you can only practice it to 75%. Well, there's some that you can practice to 100, but very few. But most you can only practice 75%. So then how do you get them higher than 75%? Well, you get something called betters, usage betters. So as you use it, let's say you used backstab, let's say you used it 5,000 times randomly. I don't know the calculation, I don't know if anybody does, but basically you just use the skill some number of times and there's an equation that comes into play. And eventually you'll get better at it, which will increase your percentage points by 1 for your learned percent. The other thing is that when you're leveling up, when you level, you can get random betters in things. So let's say you leveled up 1 level, you might get a random better in anything that you have unlocked for complexity points. So you can't get a level up better in something you haven't unlocked yet. So this gets back to why I went Bard first. So Bard has a low number of abilities. Like I said, there's music, which gives you access to a lot of things. So in your first class, you're only going to have 1 set of abilities, which is can be hard to deal with. I guess you have trouble doing certain tasks because, like, let's say if you go spellcaster first, you'll have low amount of hit points. You won't have any fighting or dodging abilities, etc. So a lot of people like to go fighter first. I sometimes lean towards going thief first. It depends on how you want to play too. If you just want to level up fast, that's one thing. If you're going to quest a bit, that kind of influences what class you might go first as well. But anyway, I picked Bard first because it had a low number of skills. And why is this good? Well, I mentioned before you can get level up betters when you level. You can actually get multiple level up betters, like let's say 2 or 3 per level, if you have your main stat maxed. So like I said before, I went Bard first, and luck is their main stat. So if you have your luck capped out when you level, you'll get, let's say, 2 or 3 betters per level instead of the average 1. So what I did, I kind of abused this, I guess you could say, or just use it to my advantage. So what I did was practice every skill that I had to 75. I slowed down my leveling by doing questing instead of actually just going out and slaughtering mobs over and over again. I did quests, and quests give you practice points. So I maximized the amount of practice points I had per level by questing slowly, and thus I was able to cap every skill that I had at 75 as soon as I unlocked it. So I would try my hardest to never level up unless all my skills were at 75, and then when I did level, I would max out my luck so that when I leveled up, I'd get 1 to 3 level betters, and those all went to increase my skills past 75 because I had so few skills. I was able to keep them max them all to 75, and then I'd level up, and all those betters would go to increase my skills past 75. So you'll see that I have things in the 80s and And these are usually leveling betters are really hard to get, so it might take you years and years and years of leveling and or just using skills to get them up at all. So this was really beneficial. So by capping those skills and using those level letters, I was able to increase almost all my skills into the 80s my first class, which is awesome. I mean, usually you might have, if you don't do this method, you probably will have maybe a few skills with 76, 77 when you're at 60, maybe 78. But I had all of my skills basically in the high 70s, mid 80s, first class. So then, once I hit 60, I quested for a while, and then I decided to go Valkyrie next, because it's good to do have your fighter out of the way first, because you'll gain a lot of hit points, and you'll gain a lot of fighting abilities. This will help you early on with your character's ability to deal with a lot of things. And the other thing was that Valkyrie also has a very low amount of skills, so I think I only gained maybe 10 skills for all 60 levels of Valkyrie beyond what I had as Bard. So that, again, allowed me to carry on the tradition of maxing everything to 75 and then leveling up and getting leveling letters that way. So by the time I was done my second class, I was a Bard Valkyrie. I had access to a bunch of spells through music. I had a bunch of fighting and defensive skills through Bard and Valkyrie, second defense, so that was that. And I quested a bit all the way through leveling. So I stayed 120 for a while to do some certain things. And then I went Ranger Priest. Ranger is a mage class that is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of a hybrid between a rogue, I'd say, and a rogue and I don't know, wizard or whatever. So I went Ranger because I didn't go rogue as my thief, so Ranger gave me tracking, which is a good skill to have. It also gave me herbalism and throwing, which are also great skills to have. They're sort of like music in the way that herbalism allows you to mix various various herbs together, which produce certain effects. You can get like healing herbs, cure poison herbs, and you can also get calm herbs, which are very helpful to have. And they also get damaging herbs. You can get high explosive herbs that deal damage. So all these things are really great to have. And only certain class combinations get herbalism. So that was a bonus. Ranger also gets web, which is helpful to have. It doesn't get a whole lot. Actually, they changed Ranger recently, so it gets a few special things. But it's not super powerful as a spellcaster. It just kind of fit the combination I had here. So I went Ranger and then Priest finally. Due to the other classes I had taken, I needed to take Priest because I needed Cure Blind and, you know, sort of have a standard healer class. So that's pretty much it. I guess real quick I'll just touch on different mages and healer classes. Healer is interesting. So Priest and Shaman are fairly similar. They're kind of standard healers, depending what race you have. And then there's two special healer classes. Druid is one. Druid is cool because it's sort of a hybrid between a wizard and a healer. And it also doesn't use regular magic. It uses invocations and evocations, which don't require a spellbook or memorization. So that's a cool reason to go Druid. They get a lot of special spells nobody else has. They get a lot of spells that have sort of I guess they're different, but have the same effect as some of the staples you need, like Cure Poison, etc. Web. So they get all that, and they don't get Cure Blind. So if you go Druid, you're going to want to go Monk or Paladin. Same thing with the other cool special healer class, which is Witch. Witch gets like almost no healing spells. They get a huge amount of debuffs, and they also get something awesome called Leech, which drains. It heals you, but you have to be fighting because it drains the HP from your opponent. So it's very powerful. The other thing about Leech is you can get various items that change how your Leech works. You can have like a fire spell that leeches, or an ice spell that leeches, or you can change the damage type, which is very helpful as well. But then again, Witch doesn't get barely any curing spells, and they don't get Cure Blind. So if you go Witch, you're going to want to go Paladin or Monk. And then as far as mages go, there's, let's see, Wizard, Ranger, Monk, and Psionic. Is that it? Yeah, Wizard, Monk, Ranger, Psionic. So Wizard and Ranger are sort of standard. Wizard gets a ridiculous amount. They get basically everything you could ever want. They have a huge amount of skills, but they do regular spell casting, so you need to collect all kinds of scrolls and manage a huge amount of spell books. Monk is kind of a special hybrid as well. They get some fighting skills, and they get some curing skills, so they get Cure Blind. So if you take Monk, and they also get Herbalism, so Monk is sort of a hybrid. Monk is really good to take. They're very versatile, and they get Cure Blind, which allows you to take one of those special cleric spell classes. And then Psionic is also pretty cool. They cast with their mind. They don't use spell books. They don't have to memorize. They have a lot of special, unique skills. They have a lot of damaging skills. They have some good PvP skills. They get a type of web, which I think it's called Memorize. I've never played a Psionic, but they get a type of web. They get a bunch of different things that are really good. But I don't know, what don't they get? I guess they don't get Dispel Magic, which is really good. Anyhow, that's Harley. I'll check out my spell list. So I kind of gave up on my maxing everything for the leveling betters once I hit 3rd class, because it's really hard to do once you get Ranger, which gives you like 60 or 70 skills, and Priest then gives you even more. So, and spells are actually harder to practice than proficiencies, so I went those classes last, so I could maximize in the beginning and then take those towards the end after I'd got all those betters, because there was no way I was going to be able to practice everything. So let's go down real quick. Let's see, armor. You have armor class like any type of game, so armor buffs your armor class. Awaken is nothing. Enemy dead, I don't know. Abjure. I just pracked that for... There's a concept of planes in this game, so there's like a regular earth plane. There's like the astral plane where you go and you're dead. And there's the fairy plane, which is where fays and cities, which are two types of, two races, kind of fairy-ish races, I guess you'd say, or magical races. They come from the fairy plane. So abjure, if you're on the earth plane and you abjure a fae or a city, it sends them back to their home plane, which I don't know if it kills them or just sends them back. Anyway, there's also a mark, a special quest you can get with that, so I practice that. Augment Aura is a special priest spell, which increases your battle damage, which is really good. So max that. Blast is good, but you can get it from a bunch of different things. You don't really need to max it to be able to... Anything you don't have to cast in combat or on short notice, you don't really have to practice up that high to be able to cast it. You can just cast it, 3 or 4 times out of combat, and it will probably work. Blink teleports you randomly around the area. I think you can also blink in a direction, which will help you travel around huge amounts of rooms. It also takes a lot of regents to cast it, though. Bubble Cluster, this is a new ranger spell. I believe it's the same as Underwater Breathing, It might give you some type of resistance as well, I forget. Call Lightning. Ranger has a couple decent damaging spells, but a couple of them, which I believe Call Lightning is one of them. You have to be outdoors to cast, which is sort of like how a Cavalier has to be mounted to do certain things. It kind of loses some of its utility when you have to be outdoors. But so I'm going to practice Call Lightning at some point. But Calm, I didn't practice. Calm is basically required to do a lot of things. Calm ends combat, so if you're fighting a mob and you need to get away, you can, or if you need to stop combat and the mob doesn't anger you, you can cast Calm or eat a Calm herb and it will stop combat. So bards have Calm through music, so that's why I haven't practiced the spell itself. Cause Critical, Cause Light, Cause Serious, I haven't practiced those. I don't know if anybody ever will or would for whatever reason. There's better things to do with your practices and your spell point. Or yeah, in combat you're basically never going to be, oh, right now I need to cast Cause whatever. So those, don't worry about those. Change sex, no. Color spray, I did prac. It does damage and it can also blind people, and it does like light. The element of the spell is light, and some races and mobs are weak against light, so it's a decent spell to have. Create food, create spring, create water. Create food and water you don't need. Almost always, you can usually always find a fountain, or once you get playing the game, you can get something called a decanter of endless water, so you will always have food and water with you. Create spring, I'm gonna practice soon. The spring that it creates, it makes a fountain, so it helps you if you're thirsty or hungry, but it also either refreshes you when you drink or cure lights you, which is, so if you're fighting a boss mob and you're going to be fighting it and then fleeing to heal up and then fighting again, you want to cast Cure Spring, or Create Spring nearby the mob's room so you can flee out and quickly drink from this spring to help with your healing. Cure Blind obviously is maxed. Many things can blind you, and it's critical for the most, unless you're fighting something wimpy, you don't want to ever be blind. So Cure Blind, max that. Cure Critical I haven't practiced. I mostly just use the spell called Heal and Cure Light in all situations. Cure Critical, well, actually I guess I should mention too, there's something called a Spell Delivery Amulet. Every spell has a certain number of seconds that it takes to cast, and when you're fighting in combat, the combat happens in rounds, and in between rounds you have a few seconds to do things. I believe it's 3 seconds. Oops. Hopefully you guys are still there. So there's some spells though that take 4 seconds or even longer if you're slowed. So there's an amulet of spell delivery, which you can get as a donation item, and that will make it so that 4-second spells cast in 3 seconds. And so normally heal is a 4-second spell and you can't cast it between rounds, which makes it less useful because you don't want to be missing rounds of combat. So I have a spell delivery amulet and no longer expires, so definitely get one of those and just practice your best healing spell, which is going to be either heal, or if you're what is it? If you're druid, I think you get invoke earth, is it? Which is the best healing spell for druid. And it's a 4-second spell as well. So those are both, you're basically going to be using heal the most. And if not, Cure Light is awesome. It cures a fair amount of damage, and it's like a 1-second spell. You can cast it while you're silenced. So all of those things make it awesome, and it takes a low amount of spell points to cast it, so you can just spam that. If I'm fighting, I can pretty much, as long as I'm not poisoned or diseased or plagued or anything, I could pretty much cast Cure Light like non-stop every fight and never run out of SP. So those are both great to have. So, and if you don't have a spell delivery amulet, Cure Critical is the best spell you can cast in between combat rounds. So that might be a reason to practice it. Cure poison, you should always have that. Cure disease, you should always have that. If you have them as spells, max them out because you're going to be wanting to remove poison and plague as soon as you get them, in most instances. Counterspell is awesome. Counterspell, if someone's casting at you and then you cast Counterspell after they start casting, you can turn their magic against them and basically either stop their spell or make their spell hit them instead. So it's awesome. There's lots of uses for it. Charm, I don't really use it, but it can be helpful. It basically, you can charm certain mobs and they'll join your party and fight with, help you to fight and do various other things. Control winds, nope. Circle of Thorns, I'm probably going to practice. It creates an aura of thorns around your room. So the room you're in, if somebody tries to sneak in or something like that, when they come into the room, it will hit them, damage them, and it will also poison them, I believe. So, helpful. Concealment, I didn't prac. I don't know. Consecrate food and armor. I think consecrate armor is good. I haven't practiced it yet. I don't know much about it. Channel faith, I have no idea. It might be useful. Camouflage, I don't have. It might be useful. Condemn, I have max. Now, this pissed me off. When I first made this class path, Priest had Curse. And Curse is a staple debuff. Basically, it lowered their armor class quite a bit, which made it so you did more damage. And it was cheap and easy to cast, and you pretty much curse everything you fight. But then as soon as I got to 240, Duende, or Duend, whatever the hell his name is, decided to reduce overlap and make kind of skills that were kind of common between multiple classes. He changed them up and took them away from some people and gave them replacements. So Condemn was supposed to be the replacement for Curse, but basically it just replaced it with a spell that nobody will ever use ever because it's so terrible. So Curse used to lower their armor class. Condemn either lowers their armor class or spell or saving versus spell, but you can't pick. It's just random. And so saving versus spell is worthless when fighting mobs. But reducing their armor class you want. However, so let's say 50% of the time it's worthless. The effect is worthless. Now, it also takes a huge amount of spell points to cast, and it also takes a huge amount of regents to cast. So instead of taking basically no or very few regents and always lowering armor class, it now takes a huge amount of regents to cast. It takes a long time to cast, and 50% of the time it will do saving versus spell, which gives you no benefit whatsoever. So I practiced it. I never use it anymore. Just not worth wasting all my regents and stuff. I'll just skip through these. Dispel Magic is awesome. If somebody is buffed up, if a mob is buffed up, or someone you're fighting is buffed up, Dispel Magic takes their buffs away, which is really good because there's a buff called Sanctuary, which makes it so you do like 35% less damage, or take 35% less damage. So if you're fighting a mob that's a tough mob, you want to take Sanctuary off them as much as you can, because you're going to be doing 35% more damage or whatever. So Dispel Magic rocks. Blah blah blah. Flint Strike, I practice. That's a new ranger one. Basically, they added a bunch of these things. I don't know what you call them, but basically you cast it, and every time you cast it, it debuffs them and makes them weaker against fire. And then once you hit a certain percentage point of them being weak against fire, it deals fire damage. So basically you could just keep spamming that. They'll get weaker and weaker and weaker against fire, and then it will start doing fire damage. So those are pretty helpful. There's a couple like that. Fungal Growth is another one, I believe. And Electrogenic Growth. So Electrogenic Growth does electric damage. Fungal Growth does acid, I think. Anyway, I'll probably practice all those. Guise of Nature, I don't have it it's only at 30%, but it It's like armor. It gives you an armor class buff. It can only be cast outside, but it also gives you a buff against wood damage, which might be a little bit helpful, but it's a little bit better than armor, and it gives you wood buff, so whatever, worth it. Hands of Wind, you can cast that as a musical song. That's really good. If you're fighting a bunch of mobs and they form up against you, it can suck. It can basically make it so you can't accomplish your goal. Like it might not be super strong, but they might be strong enough to make it so you have to flee so much that you can't kill them while you're trying to kill. Hands of Wind, as long as it might have to be outdoors to cast it, I'm not sure, but it will break apart their formation, which means you can focus on the one mob you want to fight. So that's really, really good to have. Harm, I have maxed. That's basically my go-to offensive spell. It does a lot of damage. It's necromancy damage, which some mobs and things can, protect against necromancy damage. But for the most part, Harm doesn't cost too many SP. It does a bunch of damage, and it's quick and easy. Heal, I mentioned before, is the best healing spell I have. Ice Storm I haven't practiced yet, but I probably will. That, I believe, is a room effect, so you cast Ice Storm and it just makes a thing in the room that just keeps hitting everyone that's in it with ice damage, so that's pretty helpful. As the damage over time or whatever, if you're fighting a boss mob, maybe drop that, add some damage over time. Blah blah blah. Invis, I get that from music, so don't practice that. Ice Wind, I believe, is like the strongest damage spell in the game. I haven't practiced it because the scroll costs like 30 million gold. Very rare scroll. So probably someday. Ice Ball, I do have practice. It's just an ice damage spell. Cheap and easy. Whatever. I use it occasionally. Magic Unlock I have because I don't have Bash. So one of the few drawbacks I have as my class path is I don't have Bash, which can break down certain doors. And I believe Magic Unlock can unlock most doors that Bash can bash down. Momentary Darkness, I don't have practice. That can be useful. Because it can make it so nobody can see anyone. So if you cast that, then end combat, you can make it so no one can attack you or target you. Magic Dart, I have practice, but I hardly ever use it. I should probably use it more. Just generic, super fast, super cheap damage spell. Blah, blah, blah. I won't go into those. Otholithic Growth, that's another one of those debuffs that does damage eventually. Poison Plague are debuffs. You always want to have those. Poison, if you put it on the mob, makes it so they don't regenerate HP, or well, at least it greatly hinders the regeneration of their HP, and Plague does the same thing, hinders the regeneration of their SP, so combine those and it cripples a mob. You really want to keep those on all the time if you can, if you're fighting a mob that's tough, to help take them down. Refresh is a heal that heals your stamina, which is good to have, but music gives you access to refresh. Remove Curse you want to have. It's really, just trust me, you can get debuffed with curses, and you want to take those off you. And items can also be cursed, and you want to remove the curses from those, so yeah, remove Curse. Room Shield is good. It can make it so no one can enter the room you're in, mobs or players. So if you're in a dangerous area with just one entrance in, you can Room Shield and block people out. Read Aura, well no, whatever, I'll skip that. Sanctuary, I don't have pract. Usually you want to have that from an item. I do have it scribed though, so I can cast it if I need to. Stone Skin, you want to have pract at least a bit. It's a good buff, increases your armor class. Tinnitus is a debuff that makes the mob weaker, or your opponent weaker against sonic spells. I need to practice that. I need to get a scroll for it. As a bard, I have access to sonic damage from a bard song, so that's probably worth having tinnitus as a debuff to sonic damage to maximize my damage I do. Word of Recall teleports you to the nearest recalls point, which is always helpful. If you don't have this prac, you're going to be buying scrolls and using them that way, so it's worth it just to have scribed. Web makes it so your opponent can't flee, and it also kind of cripples them, makes it so they can't do various things in combat. So yeah, web is awesome, especially if you're fighting some player who wants to flee away from you. But it's also good against mobs as well. Windwalk, I don't have pract. I thought... Oh wait, what the heck? Thinking of Whirlwind. Windwalk does what? Oh, Pass Door. I think I have it scribed, but not... practiced. And then Whirlwind, there used to be just something called Haste, which you'd usually get from an item, and it would make you attack, give you an extra attack per round. Then they added Whirlwind, which I thought was similar to Haste, but a little bit different. But it turns out Whirlwind just increases your accuracy and your wind resistance, but it doesn't increase your attack speed. Now just Haste increases attack speed, and even more than it did before. So Haste became much more powerful, and it gets replaced, and Rangers get this Whirlwind, which will basically never be used unless they adjust how it works. So that's all that. I'll just zoom through my proficiencies, so most of them are self-explanatory. Acrobatics is a defense skill that dodges things. Archery, shoot bows and arrows. It's okay to have. Only Rangers get archery. Backstab, if you have a piercing weapon, you can, and you're not in combat, you can stab someone in the back and deal extra damage and enter combat with them. So that's really helpful to have, especially if you're just zooming around. And well, anyway, there's a couple different ways you can use it. One is called flee backstab, or backstab flee, where you backstab to deal extra damage, and then you flee out the same round and just keep backstabbing as much as you can. Come back in, backstab again. This obviously doesn't work if the mob aggroes you when you enter. But if the mob doesn't aggro, you can basically take down half their life by backstab fleeing in like 2 or 3 times the speed as normal. And it's also good if you're just zooming around, need to kill stuff. If you're fighting weak mobs, you can usually kill them in one hit with a backstab. Blind fighting, if there's no light, or like if you're blind, or if the room is magically dark, blind fighting affects how well you can hit and dodge things, so that's worth it. Dagger is just a weapon, worth having. Dodge, another thing, worth having. Dodges attacks. Blah blah blah. Dart, you can either throw darts, or you can wield them as weapons, and you can even backstab with darts. I've got it pracked. Some people probably would say don't prack it, whatever. Enhanced damage, you deal extra damage. Obviously prack that. Exotic, there's some types of weapons that are just weird things that don't fall into other categories. Those are exotic. There's some decent ones, so I pracked it. Enhanced endurance, you use less stamina, I believe, so whatever, worth it. Flail, I have pracked. There's some good flails. I basically practiced every weapon type because whatever. There's a couple good weapons of every weapon type, basically, so. Foraging, not really worth it, but it finds random food sometimes. Hand to hand, if you're not wearing a weapon, you can punch people. It actually does really good damage sometimes, and it's worth it to practice that because there's some places where you might lose your weapon. You might find yourself in an instance where you don't have a weapon. So, hide makes it so nobody can see you. Really good. Herbalism, I mentioned that before. You can mix herbs together and create awesome things out of them. Herald Death, Herald Bloodthirst. Herald Death makes it so if you use this skill and then kill the mob within a certain amount of time, it basically sends them off to the afterlife, and you heal yourself when they die for a little bit. It's okay. I don't know. Herald Bloodthirst is pretty decent. I should probably practice that up some more, but basically it's a buff that you activate. It lasts a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds or a minute or something, and you deal extra damage, and your kicks deal extra damage. So since I don't have bash, I kick a lot, so win-win. Kick. It just kicks the opponent, deals extra damage in between rounds. Lore makes it so I can identify special items when I look at them. Instead of casting the identify spell, I can just look at them. Lock picking is awesome. Pick doors, chests, whatever. Mace, just a weapon. I should probably practice that up at some point. Music, obviously, gives you access to a huge amount of magical spells and abilities. Definitely practice that if you got it. It's awesome. Meditation makes your MP or SP regenerate faster, so obviously you want to have that. Blah blah blah. Nunchuck's a weapon. Polearm's a weapon. Parry, obviously. You can only parry if your opponent is wielding a weapon, so against some mobs, less useful, but still obviously worth maxing out. Peeking shows you your opponent's inventory when you look at them, helpful to check who's got what. If you're fighting mobs and you need to get a certain item, they sometimes have it in their inventory. Anyway, always worth maxing that out. Perception, I haven't practiced, but that helps you when you're searching for hidden items. Riding allows you to ride special mounts, and while you're riding, it also increases your accuracy quite a bit, so worth having. Spear is one of the best weapons. Sword, a decent weapon. Shield block, if you're wearing a shield, you can block attacks. You can also block projectiles, which is obviously awesome, worth having. If you're tanking mobs, you want to have shield block, be wearing a shield, have a high shield block skill, because you can block, fireballs and all kinds of nasty things. Anyway, second attack gives you an extra attack. Yep, take that. Scanning allows you to see around you, what's around you when you're in a certain room. Lets you see, like, up to, I don't know, 8 rooms away or something. So that's helpful when you're looking for stuff. Sneaking allows you to move, if you're not mounted anyway, allows you to move undetected, so it won't announce to anybody when you enter a room, for the most part, so you can sneak past people. Stealing, you can steal items, yep. Staff is a weapon, haven't practiced it yet. There's some decent staffs though. Snare allows you to use snare traps, which are helpful to have, yep. Second, defense, that's Valkyrie gets that, lets you use 2 of your defenses per round, epic. Definitely take that. Third attack, yep, there it gives you 3 attacks. Throwing allows you to throw herbs and bombs and various things. Tracking is very helpful. You can track down people or monsters in your area as long as certain conditions are met. But very helpful if you don't. Obviously, usually mobs can wander around, so if you want to find something quick, tracking can point you in the right direction. Throwing star, knife, axe, and spear are all special types of weapons that you can throw in combat, and you can also wield them sometimes. I found them to be very good. And then whip and yo-yo. So anyway, there you go. Hope that was helpful to somebody. Sorry I rambled on for so long. Anyway, if you watch this and made it to the end, let me know what you thought. Let me know if you have any questions. That's it for now. Talk to you guys later.